Happy Halloween, everyone! It's the internet's favorite holiday, so of course, I have a video that's in season. Unlike last year where I covered a video game inspired story, this time I'm covering a game proper. But it'd be kinda lame if I just reviewed like Resident Evil or something. Thankfully, I've come across something very unique, for lack of a better word. Introducing Plaguemon Lost Diaries. Plaguemon was created by an Italian ROM hacker slash alternative artist who goes by the name Hikikomori. Those familiar with my channel should know that neither ROM hacks nor Pokemon are strangers to my interests, but it was actually Null of Repstugog who brought this game to my attention earlier this year, and after taking one look at it, I was incredibly interested. Horror-inspired hacks aren't new to Pokemon, there's loads of them, but I guarantee you no Pokemon ROM hack goes as far as Plaguemon Lost Diaries has in the grimdark direction. So before I go any further, I have to warn those who are sensitive to gore, sexual assault, slurs, literally everything. This game has crossed every single metaphorical line imaginable, so if you're not comfortable with any of those things, I just sit this video out. Next vid will be more lighthearted, I promise. That said, I'm going to try and not show as much as the egregious stuff. So what exactly does Plaguemon do to change the original Pokemon Red? Well, most of the changes are cosmetic. You're going through the same Kanto region as always, albeit with a twist. As shown in the intro, Kanto has become the victim of a nuclear fallout. This fallout has irreparably destroyed several memorable landmarks and changed the remainder for the worse. The people of Kanto have pretty much all gone insane. You'll be hard-pressed to count the amount of decent people you come across with one hand. Your goal in Plaguemon is to escape Kanto for greener pastures, and that can only be achieved by reaching the top of Mount Olympus, aka the Pokemon League. Professor Oak gives you a Pokemon to kickstart this adventure, and you're on your way. Of course, periodically you'll be stopped by this mysterious black creature who can barely make coherent sentences. I think his name is Evilio? I'll be honest, it's kind of hard to read this font sometimes. I hope this isn't another Flesh Chaser situation. Anyone at least slightly familiar with Pokemon can probably pick up on the fact that the starting premise, and the major story beats of the game for that matter, are practically the same between the original Pokemon Red and Plaguemon. One of the main draws of this game isn't going through a completely new world using Pokemon Red as a base, rather, it's more about going to all your favorite locations and seeing what sorry state they're in now. Another draw are the titular Plaguemon. Every single one of the original 151 Pokemon have been given a grimdark makeover. Alongside these makeovers are typing renames and retcons. Almost every type has been renamed to match the setting. Grass type? Nah dude, it's drug type now. Fire? Satanic type. Water is now sex type. Electric is now nuclear, etc, etc. Some names are pretty much the same though, like flying and psychic are now aerial and mental. Pretty much no difference there, but I suppose Hikikomori felt he had to change them for the sake of consistency, but couldn't think of something edgy to replace them with. I like this idea and concept, but the execution ends up with the typings having absolutely no logic to their strengths and weaknesses. Why does mental type beat acid type? Why does sex type beat satanic type? Why did I say that out loud? I'm willing to be a little soft on this aspect though, as there are some fairly nonsensical resistances and weaknesses in the original Pokemon. I've just grown up knowing them, so they're second nature to me, unlike Plaguemon. Anyway, I went with Hellmander because I figured a satanic type would help me out in the long run over the Squirtle equivalent, and I wouldn't be caught dead using a weed Pokemon. Almost immediately after I left the professor's lab, I found my Pokemon had gotten a tumor, which has the effects of the poison status. For a while it felt as if my Pokemon would be inflicted with this seemingly at random. Eventually though, I discovered that walking over these crystals on the ground inflict the status effect. Once you reach Pewter City, you can buy an item called the Hazmat Suit, which will let you walk over these tiles without any trouble. In the meantime though, avoid these tiles at all costs. In the Viridian Pokemart, you can buy all sorts of new items unique to this game. The most fascinating of the bunch are the Flamethrower and Ketamine. Ketamine gives you a walk through walls effect for a few tiles, and then makes you spin around indefinitely. The jump at the beginning can let you skip all sorts of areas and get out of bounds, but you'll have to keep snorting the stuff if you want to cover any meaningful distance. Until you get fly though, the ketamine isn't really worth messing with. The spin effect lasts until you go to rest at your house in Pallet Town, so unless you want to be stuck spinning around like an idiot, don't bother. The flamethrower, however, is very interesting. If you press the B button while next to an NPC, you will set them on fire and kill them. No, I'm serious. There's a little animation for it and everything. The NPC is now gone forever. There are other weapons that can do similar things you'll get later. I have to imagine this required diving into the assembly or something to pull off, so color me impressed. The Viridian Forest has been renamed to the Suicide Forest, based off of the Aokigahara Forest in Japan. The atmosphere in this place is quite haunting. The sprite art of the trees coupled with the droning, dour music really sell the aesthetic of hopelessness this game is going for. One complaint though, what the fuck is this? I was trying to interact with the signs to see what new things they said, and suddenly I'm attacked by this abomination I had absolutely no hope of defeating. I took this as a lesson to save state frequently. This place is also where I grabbed 2 new members to the party, Pikachu and Gunbag. Gunbag is the equivalent to Caterpie, so I was hoping to have a Butterfree for the upcoming Pewter Gym. But I think Hikikomori fucked up the Caterpie and Weedle lines, because Gunbag evolved into Kakuzi, which, while being hilarious looking, isn't supposed to happen. So just keep that in mind if you want a Butterfree. Train up a Wormix instead, which is what I eventually did. All that training wasn't really necessary though, as I just decided to brute force the gym with the starter anyway. It's still Gen 1 after all, so Pokemon like Geodude and Onix have no real effective way to hurt fire, or rather satanic-type Plaguemon. The gym leaders have all been replaced in Plaguemon, by the way. They're all based off of musical artists that have passed away, and the first one is Kurt Cobain. Kurt is a bit of a pushover for the reasons I mentioned earlier. It takes a little bit to whittle his Plaguemon down though, so I broke out the speed up button. Get used to me using this thing, by the way. With Kurt done for, I continued on my journey. Mount Moon still needed to be completed to enter Cerulean, so I made my way through it fairly quickly. Unfortunately, Mount Moon is almost completely unchanged from its original incarnation. None of the cave areas had any sort of makeover for that matter, which makes them quite dull to explore. I am introduced to the Team Rocket replacement, Plague Corps here though. Besides that, there isn't much to discuss, so on to Cerulean. For my entire playthrough thus far, I was anticipating the trip to Cerulean for one big reason. One I'm sure you can all figure out. I was very curious about if the Mew glitch could still be performed at this point in the game. There are so many steps where someone aware of the glitch could manipulate things to make sure that it's not replicable. You can make it so there's no Aber to be found, remove the trainer used in the trainer escape glitch, or even change the roster of Pokemon the Cerulean City gym trainer uses. But to my surprise, it all worked. Everything was in its right place, and with a little deja vu, I caught myself a Mew. Or rather, a 2 Mew. Now to just grab it out of the PC and we'll be on our way. Just grab it out of the PC and... Just grab it out of... Just! Okay, so I don't have any proof of this, but I'm fairly sure that Hikikomori made it so trying to take this Pokemon out of the PC softlocks your game. Any other Pokemon you take out, it's just fine. I have to assume this is intentional, no? At first, I was pretty pissed off about this, but I've had some time to simmer on it, and I'm more impressed than anything. I totally got taken for a ride. Oh well. I guess there's no 2 Mew for me. Oh please, did you really think I was going to give up there? I reloaded a save and had to redo a pretty hefty amount of progress, but I attempted the glitch again. This time with space in the party, and presto. If you're disappointed that I'm just going to stomp the rest of the game with the same strategy from Let's Horribly Break Pokemon Blue, let me placate you here and say, I'm only going to use this thing as a last resort. A lot of the fun in these hacks comes from showing off the new Pokemon design, so I'll try to do that as much as possible. Just, I don't really want to grind. And if the 2 Mew will expedite the process, then it'll get used. Regardless, it's time to take on the second gym leader, Little Pete. I tried to use Pikachu against him, but in case you weren't aware, Pikachu is actually a pretty shitty Pokemon. A light breeze could knock it over, and it doesn't pack much of a punch. It's fast, that's about it. I resorted to using save states until the Starmie replacement kept suffering from paralysis. I could have just sicked the Mew on it, but I wanted the Pikachu to get the experience. While I'm here though, why don't I talk about the battle screen? Looks a little different, right? Plaguemon changes the battle settings to a sideways view as opposed to the over-the-shoulder look of the original Pokemon games. I'm not going to say that this approach is better per se, but I can see why it was done. With this sideways view, there's no need to create back sprites for any of the Plaguemon, which would have been necessary for what I hope are obvious reasons. Not to mention the back sprites in Gen 1 are super fucking ugly. I think my favorite part about this new battle screen though is the background. It breathes a significant amount of life into the fights, even if the locale doesn't always match up with the overworld. The biggest issue with this new style of battle is the game's logic still thinks that it's formatted like the original game, meaning that the sprites of trainers will still appear in the top right corner of the screen when the battle ends, which looks quite ugly, like it doesn't belong. Also, sometimes items the trainers used would be bugged, like a potion meant for their Pokemon would instead heal mine. It's not really the end of the world or anything, but these are definitely textbook glitches. That said, a majority of these glitches are likely intentional, as a means of furthering the DIY punk aesthetic of the hack. Just like the world of Plaguemon, the programming of the hack itself is rough around the edges. It isn't much later until I've made it to Vermilion. Like in the original game, I took a small detour to get the SS ticket from Bill, except this time it's a ticket to the Titanic. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember reading that the Titanic was full of KKK members. Then again, there wasn't a guy with a flamethrower on there either, so maybe we can suspend our disbelief. In case you forgot, the whole point of going on this ship is to get the Cut HM. So I didn't waste much time fighting trainers and just made a beeline towards the captain's room. There's another encounter with Evilio beforehand, and he made about as much sense as he normally does. He's taken care of quickly, and it's back to Vermilion to take on the gym leader. The Titanic took off without me, and has surely made its voyage without any problems. After all, this is Plaguemon Lost Diaries, a beacon of hope and good feeling. The gym leader of Vermilion is Lemmy Killmeister of Motorhead. I have a bone to pick with this gym, and no, it's not about the shitty trash can puzzle, but the depiction of Lemmy as the Lightning American. I know that's Lieutenant Surge's moniker, but come on now, Lemmy was as English as they come. It couldn't have hurt to change the sign. Unfortunately, this isn't the only inconsistency on display in this game. Seemingly at random, NPC dialogue will remain untouched from the original Pokemon Red. There's actually a huge example of this with the rival encounter next to Viridian that I failed to mention earlier. Behold, the psychotic Evilio form complete coherent sentences with ease. It's kind of a shame because there's just enough of these scenarios to be unignorable, and unlike the graphical bugs, it hurts the atmosphere of the game. Anyway, where was I? Right, Lemmy. So I don't know why, but I didn't have to fight Lemmy for him to give me his badge. If he was just gonna give me it, I wouldn't complain, but still, it would have been nice to see his battle sprite. There isn't much left to do here, so it's time to go to the rock tunnel. I made an executive decision to not grab Flash. I forgot to grab it. And just brute force my way through the dark cave instead. On an emulator, this isn't that hard since you don't have to worry about screen glare or no backlight further obscuring your vision. God damn, how did we play games on these things? You know, I pulled my old Game Boy out a few years ago and was astounded by how hard it was to see the fucking... You would think that Lavender Town would be this game's piece de resistance, but it isn't particularly any worse off than most of the other areas in the game. Hell, Saffron City's a fucking crater. The Pokemon Tower is fairly interesting though. I'm going a little out of order here because you still have to get the Sylph Scope and Celadon first, but since we're here now, I'll just show it off. The biggest change is the addition of this minigame on the first floor. With the AK-47 that's bought at the Lavender Town Pokemart, you can do this little gallery shooter minigame. I don't think there's any greater purpose to this game, but it's another example of Hikikomori's programming prowess. The rest of the tower is pretty much the same as in the original game, except there are no channelers to be found. We're going to find this to be a recurring theme from here on out. I'll extrapolate on that later. At the top of the tower, we are forced into an encounter with a Plaguemon, but probably not the one you expect. Instead of the Marowak analog, we appear to be face to face with Dragonite's replacement. It's fairly tough as you could expect, but since I have the level 102 Mew, it's not insurmountable. What I found interesting was when this Plaguemon was defeated, there was a text box placing a curse on my character. Maybe I'm giving the game a little too much credit, but I actually did wonder if this would have some sort of effect on my game. As far as I could tell, it didn't, but the fact that I entertained the thought at all says something about this game. Going further up the tower pits you up against a gang of cultists. They don't pose much of a threat either, and go down quickly. This is how you get the shovel, the replacement for the Poke-Flute. Instead of waking up a Snorlax, you have to dig out a path of decaying bodies blocking the way. Look, if you're surprised about that at this point, I don't know what you were expecting. But this isn't all you can do here. Instead of talking to the NPC at the end of this hall, continue going forward. You'll be taken to this futuristic locale and a Plaguemon will be waiting for you. What Plaguemon? Well, none other than 2 Mew at level 50. Now, did I feel like a jackass for going through all that trouble to get a Plaguemon the game was gonna let me catch 2 hours later anyway? Kinda, but I don't like to dwell on failure, so that's all we're going to say on this matter. Let's take care of Celadon. In contrast to the neighboring Saffron, Celadon City feels almost unscathed from disaster. At least on the surface. The most noticeable change is the absence of the game corner, and therefore no rocket hideout. You may be wondering then, how do you get the Sylph Scope if there's no rocket hideout? Well, every plot important item can usually be found in the Pokemart it's nearest to for free. So to grab the Sylph Scope and Plaguemon, you just have to visit the department store. I'm not really shedding any tears over the loss of the rocket hideout, because honestly I hate that dungeon, but this omission is just the first of many from here on out. So far in this video, I've been going from landmark to landmark, but after Celadon, that's not going to really make much sense anymore. Let me put this into perspective. It took about the same time for me to get the first 3 gym badges as it did to do the remaining 5. Outside of some exceptions, landmark locations are either completely gutted or just gone. Saffron has been completely annihilated as mentioned earlier, so no Silphco. The Pokemon Mansion is mostly the same, except for a small gauntlet of trainers and a new Plaguemon at the bottom. But it also isn't necessary to traverse, as you can just buy the key to Blaine, or rather, Chester Bennington's gym. I think the most disappointing omission is the Safari Zone, though. I was really hoping that Hikikomori had done something cool with the place. It doesn't end there, though. Overworld trainers pretty much disappeared from Celadon onward as well. You could make the case that this adds to the dour atmosphere of the game, which I wouldn't disagree with. But couple this with the removed locations, and it becomes another thing that speeds this part of the game up significantly. Even the gyms have had their puzzles completely removed or streamlined. Also, something worth mentioning is, by this point in the game, the music had really started to get on my nerves. The tracks themselves aren't terrible, but they're very slow, drone-like tracks, and the amount of music is incredibly lacking. Every town and route have the same theme, and if you're wearing the hazmat suit, which you should, then you're hearing a different, sparse tune over and over. All of this removal of content and lack of new music makes me wonder if Hikikomori just ran out of steam when reaching this point of the game. With all that said, it shouldn't be much of a surprise to say that I don't have much to say about the remainder of this game until the end. The remaining gym leaders are Dolores O'Riordan from the Cranberries, rapper Tupac Shakur, Amy Winehouse, and Chester Bennington from Linkin Park. Before I know it, it's time to return to Viridian. Of course, before I go any further, I have to visit an old friend and prepare. Of course, I'm going to use Missing No to clone rare candies. I pretty much have to do this, because the trainer battles have completely dried up. One thing I will give this game, though, regarding grinding, is the majority of Pokemarts will sell you Agent P/rare candies. They're like 1k a pop, but having access to these at all is nice, if not necessary. With everything squared away, it was time to face the final gym. I was really curious what artist I was going to be surprised with next. Imagine my surprise when I was pitted against a bootleg Super Mario. He really didn't stand a chance against me though, and the battle was over before I knew it. Initially, I was let down that this was the final gym leader, but the item he gave made up for that disappointment. The Dark Chip is an item that you give to your starter that gives them a third evolution. This evolution turned my two-headed satanic dragon into some crazy looking Hydra thing. Admittedly, I think this design is a bit of a step down, but it's also given the Divinity type. That sounds pretty powerful, so I think this was an improvement overall. With all the gyms done, it's time to traverse Mount Olympus, which requires us to complete one more dungeon, Victory Road. Or does it? When I initially went through the Indigo Plateau and tried to enter Victory Road, the door wouldn't let me enter. I'd walk over it and nothing would happen. So that's it, right? Game ends here? Well, no. I had a feeling this would happen because people online mentioned this situation happening to them in their versions of the game. Remember the ketamine? We can use that to hop over the building that houses Victory Road and completely skip it. What's really interesting though is when returning to this location, the pathing is fixed and Victory Road is accessible. So if you're interested in completing that level legit, there you go. As for me, well, I never found the Strength HM, so I'm gonna have to turn to drugs. The Elite Four in Plaguemon have been replaced with religious deities from all over the world. Take, for example, Jesus Christ. Yes, we are fighting Jesus Christ in a Pokemon game. There's also the Buddha, Satan, and Muhammad. The last of which I will not show because that is haram. You know the drill at this point, this game can't really challenge me anymore, so it's a breezy shot to the finish line where we face off against Evilio. This is when we get the big reveal regarding what exactly this thing even is. Unfortunately, it's not very exciting, it's just your dark thoughts manifested into its own person. Defeating it once and for all banished my evil thoughts from my mind and allows me to escape Kanto. How does this happen? Well, all throughout this game, there's been some hints of a meta-narrative going on. It seems a lot of the NPCs in this game know that they're code in a video game. This crescendoed with the 8th gym leader, Plario, revealing to the player that the game we're playing was created by himself and Plague Corp. The way to escape Kanto is by disconnecting yourself from the game, effectively killing you. There's a cool animation of the Avatar character disintegrating while Where's My Mind by the Pixies plays in the background. And that ends Plaguemon Lost Diaries. Something I want to mention is while the professor is explaining this in the last moments of the game, he tells you to burn the cartridge. Presumably because doing that will free everyone else who is suffering in this hack. I find this interesting because Plague Labs has actually sold reproduction carts of Plaguemon Lost Diaries on his website in very limited quantities. It makes me wonder if anyone actually decided to follow through on that request, and if that's what Hikikomori wanted. But that's pretty much the end. I did clean up on some areas I missed the first time around, though. I still didn't have strength, but a wise man once said that a man can do anything with enough ketamine in their body. My guy here has done so much ketamine at this point, it got me curious what the side effects are to ketamine abuse. These are fairly uncommon, but chances are my player character could be suffering from, but not limited to, depression, anxiety, abdominal pain, hematuria, dysuria, and ulcerative cystitis. Look these up at your own risk. But basically, let's just say bathroom breaks will be frequent and unpleasant for them in the near future. There. See? You learned something. Watching a guy on YouTube talk about video games isn't a complete waste of time after all. The legendaries on display would have been hard to catch, but the final Pokemart sells Master Balls, so there wasn't any problem there. I heard that the power plant has some cool stuff in it, but tried as I might, it was impossible for me to traverse it. There has to be some sort of way to explore it, but no matter what I tried, the game would constantly softlock at the entrance while it played music endlessly. It reminded me too much of Let's Horribly Break Pokemon Blue, so I started disassociating until I turned off the emulator. Plaguemon Lost Diaries has to be the most fascinating, biggest mix bag of a ROM hack I have ever played. The atmosphere is incredibly effective in selling the world as a hopeless post-apocalypse. The low-fidelity aesthetic allows your mind to fill in a lot of the blanks. The monster designs and sprite work in general are incredibly grotesque and imaginative. There's even some impressive ASM coding to make certain parts of the game work. These were clearly Hikikomori's strengths and deserve props, but the design of the game itself is insanely lopsided. Halfway through, the pacing increases exponentially for the worse, making battling almost pointless, and heavy grinding necessary if you don't plan on cheating like I did. The story, while being somewhat interesting near the end, suffers from this pacing problem as well, since neither the Rocket Hideout nor Silphco are in the game anymore. The villains, Plague Corp, are never seen again after Cerulean. My problems with the story run deeper than that, though. I gotta talk about the writing. This is the major thing holding me back from recommending Plaguemon to people. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I can handle pretty grotesque stuff, but even I felt uncomfortable at times. Which is definitely what it's trying to go for, I understand that, but at times it really does feel like it's being shocking for the sake of being shocking. I would recommend Plaguemon, but only to a specific type of person. Chances are you already know if you're that type of person by this point. Otherwise, you're better off walking away from this game, or maybe burning the cartridge and never looking back.